Yeah, absolutely brilliant. We've got one more now, and then we will go to a coffee break. So we've got our panel session coming up now, just to finish this particular segment of the event. We've then got Ken Bruce and Fleury's coming up later on before we do the big close. But for now, Niamh, can you please make the introductions for this session?
Absolutely, I can. In this next panel, we're hearing practical advice to get customer data working harder. Joining our chair, Sam Tidmarsh, is Nick Travis, Customer Marketing Director at Lloyds Banking Group. Lesley Myers-Lamptey, Head of Commerce Strategy at T&Pm. Adam Smith, Head of Strategy and Insights for Twinings. Sandra Hughes, Omni-Channel Measurement Director at Tesco Media. And Salman Chaudhry.
Wow, so how do you follow that? Easy, a panel about customer data, right? So here we are, we've got that fun task to do. I've really stitched up my panellists today. But customer data, what can it do? What can it do? It can provide insights about product, creative, channel, context. Info that can help you enhance your marketing strategy and engagement with customers. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And we're going to find out what it means in practice. I think that first panel of the day was almost the perfect predecessor to this panel. We heard about the theory, now we're going to talk about the practice. Is it hard to do? Is it easier said than done? Can we make the data work harder? And what advice do our panelists have? So something that I thought was really interesting that Sam Taylor from Direct Line said earlier, well, I'm going to paraphrase him slightly, and this is based off a couple of conversations I've had with him too. He said after years of brands pushing media owners and broadcasters to do more data, more targeting, now it's the media owners that can deliver and the brands who are beginning to fall behind. So quick down the line, one word, agree or disagree?
One word. I think kind of largely that is true.
That's not one word, Nick.
Not one word. Well, yes, I kind of agree, yeah.
I'd say agree, but there's reasons why.
Okay. Mysterious.
Similar place. I agree they're not doing everything they can.
Okay.
I agree they're not doing everything they can, but I think they want to.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think they want to.
So nobody's willing to disagree?
No.
Ah, well, there we go. Nick, what barriers do marketers have? What's stopping them?
I mean, it's not easy, right? So I think we've probably made more progress on this than most advertisers, but you've got to get your consents right, you've got to get your integrations and the kind of data and compliance guys, you've got to get your organization in the right place. You have data and compliance and legal people, right? There's a bunch of stuff, right? It's not, cookies were relatively easy. You could just kind of place a pixel and get on with it. The data integrations that you have to do to make this work are quite complex. Plus when you layer on all the kind of GDPR and compliance stuff on top of that, it gets really complicated. And then you've got to build all the different integrations into the different kind of platforms that you want to go into. But I think kind of lots of people kind of struggle with the kind of getting the kind of core use cases properly. Right? They just think targeting. And we try and think much more broadly than targeting, right? It's about exclusions is just like the primary use case. How can you use it just to save money by not talking to people that already bought your products or don't want that product? Right? How can you kind of use it to build lookalike models? How can you do it to kind of bring in third-party data that enriches your own data? How can you kind of use it to do insights, just matching? I've got this set of customers. What articles are they reading? Which platforms are they on? And how can you use it for measurement? Right? Just try and kind of think through your kind of data strategy more holistically than just doing targeting, and that kind of really helps you kind of build out the kind of use the value proposition that sits with it.
At Lloyds, you've been thinking about this for a few years, right?
Yeah, I've been trying to build it for about 5 years now. So,
what advice would you give to the people in the room about how to overcome these challenges?
Oh, well, you got to do data audits, right, and understand where your kind of blind spots are, what your kind of consent frameworks look like, and then really it does start with consent. So it's the kind of the bit that we've been trying to do internally recently is try and kind of repivot kind of first-party data from being kind of digital wizardry into kind of kind of branding it as just part of the CRM mix. You know, why shouldn't it be talked about in the same breath as kind of email and DM? Right? You know, we can go and kind of land impactful AV assets in kind of targeted environments with our customers, and I think you know, trying to change the narrative to think about it more like that is quite powerful.
Adam, are you seeing the same kind of things that Nick's seeing? You're a very different business in terms of what you're delivering to Twinings. If you think about the customer data you're surely getting, is that not quite limited? You're not getting those channels back from the retailers who supply your products?
Yeah, I hear Nick talk this a couple of times now, and it scares the shit out of me, to be honest. I think, what should I be doing all that? Is my boss hearing this? That kind of thing. But the reality is, it's as a number of people have said during today, it's a 10-year journey for Tom, it's a 5-year journey for Nick, it's a mountain for, I think it was Sam that said it. And these things, we're all, sorry to use a line, but we're on a journey from Lloyds. And everybody's at a different part of that journey, and it is all dependent on the market, on the business. It's right, what Nick's doing is right for the business, right for the market, right for the consumer touch points that they're working with. We, being Twinings and an FMCG, predominantly built all of our audience understanding in a different space, and it kind of is all about the behaviour in consumers' lives in the broadest sense. And so therefore, anything that we do with, for example, data signals is kind of threefold. One is to kind of link to that understanding. If we kind of ignore the foundational learning about our consumers at our peril, because that is something that should hold true throughout everything we've done. We've built strategy off it, we've built plans from it. And so data is no different. Data-driven marketing isn't anything other than marketing that has data influencing it. And so those data signals that we receive can help to link to what we already understand. It can help to augment what we're already understanding and help to build a picture of consumers. And then, of course, it can help us to activate against it in a way that is befitting of the consumer brand experience that we've designed as part of the strategy. I kind of see the opposite as a kind of the film Inside Out, where you've got a teenage girl kind of being controlled by multiple different emotions, and which is a kind of a horror film for someone who's got a 9-year-old girl at the moment, what might be to come. But similarly, the business can be kind of all looking for to press the buttons. Let's retarget. We've seen a data signal. Let's retarget. Let's convert them. Let's do X, Y, and Z. Let's serve them some brand comms. But the reality is, what we need to be doing is remembering what's at the heart of our strategy, remembering what's at the heart of our consumer experience, and using those data signals to learn about that interaction we've had with those consumers, and then build on it, and for it to all to be an iterative thing.
Lesley, what are your clients saying? Are they having the same? Are they saying the same things to you that Nick is? What are they talking to you about? What do they require? And could you just reflect a little bit on Sam's line?
Yeah, I think that it's quite interesting when it comes to data and the clients that we're working with. We work with lots of different clients on different verticals. So you've got some, such as Telcom, who have a huge amount of data, know loads about their customer. And then you have others where it's an FMCG brand, and actually they don't have hardly any data, and they're not really going to collect some. So how we advise and work with our clients is to say, what's the best use of data for them, or what partners could they use with, and what are the experiments they could be doing in media to kind of understand if they're driving that growth for the brand, and if they're acquiring new customers, and then how they can actually analyse it and look at the full commerce and customer experience. So this is not only just reaching them through activation and media, but also thinking about once they arrive at that destination, whether it's a website or it's a retailer, what's that experience look like for them there? And then once they do convert, how would we make sure we're really optimising that experience and turning those customers into lifetime value, a higher lifetime value, improving that loyalty and that retention.
Are there surefire ways of doing that? What are you giving the same advice to most clients? Or
No, it'll vary depending on the client, as I said, because I think some first-party data, or at least customer data, is more important for them to necessarily own and use.
Are you
and
hearing,
others.
this need for first-party consumer data coming up more and more in conversations?
I think there's lots of opportunities. So with that point about, how a lot of media owners have opened up and working with partners, that's fantastic. So sometimes I'm thinking, we don't need to get it ourselves, we can work with a partner. But I think one of the challenges is that it's still very fragmented. So there's still lots of different data partners, and you could be buying that same person, because in the end of the day, it's only one person, in multiple different ways with different partners. So I think the next challenge is how do we really consolidate that single view of a customer in a way which is usable for them, and then that can help explain why you're willing to maybe pay those extra costs for data. There's always a bit of a trade-off. Should we pay a bit more for that customer data? Will it actually drive a better return and response? So it comes back into measurement and what does that ROI look like? And there's been a lot about incrementality, but that's exactly what we're trying to talk to clients about at the moment, about how do they drive that growth and that incrementality.
Salman, talking about insights, right? How are insights playing a role in media strategies? And can you just reflect on a little bit on what Sam said earlier?
I think so, almost touching on that, and I think Lesley makes a really good point there. It does come down to the brand, almost the intention behind what it is. Is it brand marketing? Is it performance marketing? Are the goals to grow and have retention? Is it awareness? What we've always found with some of the very sort of broad customers we work with, many on this stage, is that generally what we found is an outside-in perspective does actually work far better, where you'd potentially see what the market is doing because of the cost of sort of either generating creatives, going to market, figuring out what channels to work on, and then actually going back internally, looking at your own data, looking at your profiles, your target consumers, your demographics, your sort of potential sort of areas that you want to grow into, and then follow it through from there. So it is kind of it's dual-sided here, where you go to market and figure out what your competitors are doing, see what's trending, see whether or not UGC is as big as people say it is, whether we should be focusing on Gen Z because of what's happening on TikTok. Then you validate it with your internal data points and your internal go-to-market, and then you deliver a message. And I guess that's what sort of some of these agencies do so well.
Sandra, what are you saying?
In terms of, I think for me, it goes back to your original question. And what I'll say is, working with FMCGs, I think they're asking all the right questions. They're asking everything that around the branding, through the mid-funnel, bottom of the funnel. It's just that they don't have the data at the moment. Now, obviously, we have the data. So I am getting a lot of very challenging but really great questions. I've got my notes because I'm like 6 weeks in. But in the 6 weeks, I have had some really intuitive, clever marketing questions. And actually, the challenge is on us to be able to answer that. And it's definitely around, obviously, when you've got, I think it's 30 years now of Clubcard. And there's like 28 million households. There's 82% in terms of transactions going through Clubcard. That's a lot of data. So I think it's up to us to make sure that that is, analysed, presented in a way that's meaningful and can help, inform the audiences. So that's actual behaviour, but also predicted behaviour. To use that, and obviously using AI, I've got to say it, using AI so you can get really precise around it. And then they can do, clever marketing plans. They'll know their audience. They'll know if it's lapsed or it's going to lapse, or if they're category buyers or non-category buyers. There's a wealth of information, and they can apply their marketing to achieve their specific objectives. I think then it's also then the measurement. You brought it up. And it's been, I don't know how many of you have been here all morning, but there's a lot of talk around incrementality. And I have heard that constantly throughout. And I think coming from a retail media perspective, it's not just the incrementality, it's the full funnel. It's the, the brand right through to repurchase. It's the omnichannel, because then you've got loads of different touch points, whether they're online or offline, and you can relate them back to your stage in the funnel. And then it has to be incremental. I think it was Lipman who's showed that chart that you've probably all seen that's going around where there's no correlation between ROAS and iROAS. And that's why we have to get to incrementality, to know where to actually spend more of the budget to maximize that return. So, yeah, I could go on all day, and the questions I'm getting asked.
Here's the problem is that, we we would work with, some of our ad spend goes to dunnhumby, some of it goes to Sky, some of it goes to ITV. Can we use all of the data that all of them have got? No, not in the slightest, nowhere near. And so you've got to make decisions, you've got to work with the right partners. And I think I've been kind of inspired by quite a few stories throughout the day, whether that's Pepsi or whoever it is, about being really clear on what your question is or your challenge is or the outcome is that you're trying to get to, and then finding people and challenging them and putting it with them and saying, right, well, let's get in the room and say this. We need to solve this together for our brand, of course, at great value for the consumer as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about knowing what the question is and setting up those hypotheses in the first place, because actually, just customer data isn't necessarily going to be the right answer. Sometimes there's lots of open source data, which can give a whole lot of insight. And there's companies who are doing that and allowing you to sort of test. And so there is constantly just balancing between, is this something that I can do from open source? Do I need to work with a certain partner? Which is the right partner? And that should all be set up before you do any sort of experimentation with data.
So you're right there, isn't it? If you're not clear what the outcome is that you're trying to deliver, you'll always you'll have the wrong measurement in place for a starter. And then you make wrong hypothesis about the data. There's lots of terrible data out there. I can tell you, I've bought loads of it. It doesn't do what it says on the tin. Or you're trying to use data for kind of too broad a use case, and the cost just spirals, and therefore you should have just talked to everyone anyway. If you're laser focused on what you want to do, I've got a customer that's mortgage is about to come back round. I know what message I need to deliver to him, and then it becomes, well, which channels is going to be most effective to do that in, and how can I set up tests to find out?
Yeah, I think that's the, sorry. No,
you go.
I think that's the common theme here, right? I think if you go into, the challenge with big data is you will always find what you're looking for because of how many data points you have and the breadth of this. So unless you go in with that intentionality and that specific goal, those business goals, you're effectively always going to come undone. And I definitely agree with the idea that you do need data. And I think brands actually need to own a lot of the data rather than very often sort of going out to market and asking sort of third parties what the other third party is saying. Because very often, especially in a world where, as Sam said earlier today, where we are in such a dynamic marketplace, such a dynamic space for advertising, decisions can be made on Thursday that can be put into effect on Friday. There may be a campaign that may not be working, a strategy that may not be working for the quarter. And you have the option to switch very quickly. And I think the brands that do that are the ones that are mostly successful. So I think this idea of knowing what you actually want as an overall goal should be effectively what drives the strategy. But having the internal data to bait and switch when you need to is actually, I think, the key thing in all of this.
Sorry, after you.
Sorry, yeah. And just one point to add to that in terms of incrementality is critically important. We're all talking about it. I agree with that 100%. I also think we need to dig into that. It's not just iROAS. There's other elements around that, which could be new to brand, new customer, incremental new customers, looking at the longer term, lifetime value. All of those aspects fit into it. So it may not perform in iROAS initially, but unless you're looking at the longer term, you could be, I was going to say that saying, it's really bad. Then it's just bad. It's just not a good thing to do, and you won't have longer term benefits.
Part of the reason we put together this panel today is we were looking at retail media, we're looking at closed loop attribution where it can offer, we're talking about data-driven media, talking about the opportunity to see exactly what's going on. This closed loop attribution, how important is it to clients? Because surely that is proving outcomes more effectively. Lesley, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, I've got quite a few FMCG clients, and this is really exciting, the fact that you can now get this closed loop measurement. The reason why is because for some of our clients, over 80% of the purchase happen in store, but we know that a lot of our target audience's time is spent in digital environments and online, or even might run a TV ad, and then you don't really know what's happened there. So to be able to know that you have ran an ad and be able to track whether it's happened in store or online is hugely exciting. So we're starting to see more tests and more understanding around that from our clients. And I think this is an area which is really going to start to grow further and further. As I said, the next step, I think, is that consolidation of that full retailer experience. Because I don't know about you, but I have about I don't know, 20 different loyalty cards in my Apple Wallet where I'm, you know, a customer on all these different brands. So I think, you know, from a consumer perspective and from a brand perspective, if they just want to see that one person in that one place rather than on, you know, Tesco, Sainsbury's and all the other sort of like retailers.
Is it super, super useful data for you to have, Adam, surely?
Yeah, I don't think we can, as much as that Elysium would be amazing, I don't think we could ever kind of expect the big retailers to get together and say, let's put our own data together and help the
Might
consumer.
make it through probation.
No, put it on the table tomorrow, see what happens.
I'll have to say, we have got a solution at Group M, so maybe have a chat with us.
Okay, we're done with the advertising.
Okay.
But yeah, the more we can pull stuff together, the better. You're completely right. We a lot of FMCG companies can fall into the trap of talking about shoppers and consumers as if they're different people, and then Amazon shoppers as another different person, and then your direct-to-consumer CRM databases and a whole other different person. It's probably the same person called Bob going to all these different places, and we're assuming they're different, and we assign different attributes to each of them. And so any way we can get to a disaggregation of that, or some way of understanding what that means for us, so that we can actually use those insights, that, you know, the better. Again, it comes down to the right partners, and the right, what you're trying to do, the right outcomes, the right brief.
And Sandra, connecting this whole world of data-driven media together, how does Tesco Media Insight platform, how do you integrate with the other media owners? How is this feeding into CTV, into out of home? How's it all connecting up?
It's a very complicated network there's a lot in place, but it will continue to grow. I think one of the benefits of it, if you have that audience that, you know, that answers your hypothesis or the question that you want to answer, and you've tailored your creative for that, you can obviously do it within the store and on site, and that's great. But what you want to be able to do is have that persistent audience with a broader reach, whether it's through Meta or Pinterest or CTV. So we've done partnerships from a media perspective. Like I say, it's the trading desk for programmatic, ITV, Channel 4, Sky, Meta and Pinterest from a social perspective. There's integrations done. We used like Infosum or LiveRamp in order to do the clean rooms. So that's where the matches happen. That's where the audiences get matched. And
Are
then
you getting enough data to put into those clean rooms to get good matches on either side?
The match rate varies. The bigger the audience, the higher the match. So that match rate does vary, but they do provide sizable audiences, and it's up to the brand or the supplier, brand, client, whatever the terminology is now, to decide if that's a big enough reach. But you can do it across so many things that you can build that reach up. Yeah. I think the other stage of that is once you have those audiences, how do you measure it? Now, that's where it becomes a little bit more complicated, because not all partners are willing to provide exposure data. So we have to get clever around the way what methodologies we use in order to try and get that incremental metric, and whether it's brilliant if it's, test and control, or do we have to do synthetic controls, or do we have to do retrospective controls? But we're very, very visible in terms of the methodology and make that clear. But there's conversations we're having with some media partners who I think might now be willing to give exposure data that weren't before, so it's ever evolving.
Are you able to announce which ones?
No.
I want to get you sacked straight away.
6 weeks.
But yeah, it's just, some will never, ever, ever. I know that for a fact. I know it from my history. Some will never do it. Others are more up to looking at ways to do it. But I think the clean rooms, the privacy aspect, that's, as we evolve more in that, privacy methodologies, it's opening up more avenues.
Maybe you can tell me later over a coffee.
Over a wine.
All of this is about, everything to do with customer data is about helping brands to make smarter decisions. So, where should spend be going? How should it be optimized? Salman, what are you seeing? What are you telling your clients?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, again, I know we've sort of touched upon it, but knowing what the overall goal is first, and then how adaptable you are. So I think one of the things that we're seeing very much is if the status quo is to either maintain market share or to sort of promote a new product in a range, I think generally we'll find the go-to-market being pretty much identical. what we're seeing, for example, let's say in Twinings space, for example, as a good case is Dirty and a few big D2C brands starting to come in and doing very well. Their market, their sort of a target market is Gen Z. And so a lot of it is TikTok, a lot of it is YouTube. So I think a lot of it comes down to how quickly you can see a campaign is working and how quickly you can respond. And UGC helps massively in this as well, right? So theoretically, so much of this can happen within a day or two. And so when we look at what our customers are doing, especially when they're looking to either grow market share or break into a space where they have these big incumbents, effectively, a lot of it is about your media mix. A lot of it is about sort of meeting the customer where they are. And then a lot of it is reacting quickly. So again, if my target market is, 3 demographics, female 60 plus, men 16 to 24, and you may have these overlapping demographics. Where do you meet them? How do you meet them? What channels do you meet them on? And then if is the messaging landing? And if it's not landing, how do we adapt quickly? Because effectively on quarterly planning now with these smaller brands, but also these mid-sized brands, you burn through your budget immediately. So the idea is how do you keep those goals, but adapt your budget?
Has anybody else got anything to say on that?
No, I think I'll, agree to that. And I think he's talking quite a lot about the content that you put in front of people. And I think we've been talking a lot about customer and data, but the content is hugely important. And how do you make that relevant to the person that you want to reach? So there is obviously the benefits of personalization, but there's just generally more relevance as well. So whether it's working with content creators or it's an ad, and I think that's the next step, really. You can have all the data in the world, but without the right content, you're not going to drive that action.
Yeah, I mean, creative is still absolutely king, right? So the more targeted you can be, and the more channels you go into, the more creative you need, right? You can't just kind of port the kind of same creative for different segments into different channels and expect it to be optimal. I mean, yeah, it will work, but if you want to kind of get the absolute kind of best return on your investment, you're going to need to kind of make sure the creative's kind of fit for the segment and the channel that you've chosen to put it in.
Exactly.
And then learning always, bringing it all back in again, back to that consumer understanding plan you've got at the start that says, this is my consumer, what it looks like, whatever that segment might be, but demographic or behavioural. And then whatever you're doing, you're learning to be able to inform it that this creative didn't work with this. It tested well when we did it in the big creative test, but it's not working with this part of the audience, or it's not working at this part of the year with that audience, or whatever it might be. But you're continuously learning and adapting, no matter what channel those learnings are coming from, which isn't easy.
Jack's going to talk about it a little bit on a panel tomorrow about digital shifts in the afternoon, but we're talking about customer data here. Google have made an interesting decision this year to roll back on their plans to kill cookies. Has it got you convinced?
No. I mean, yeah, they were... I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone that's kind of followed this for long enough that the sandbox wasn't going to be the answer. So, they've seemingly tried and failed to push the solution over to the customer because the CMA haven't bought that either and said you still need to kind of make sure that you're kind of not just ruining the ecosystem and saying, well, the customer did it, not us, right? So I'm absolutely not convinced about it, but I haven't been convinced about cookies for a long time, right? So I've been kind of frantically building server-to-server integrations with anyone I can for kind of 4 or 5 years now. So, there are lots of different approaches to cookies, whether it be kind of server-to-server, whether it be first-party data, whether it be kind of alternative IDs. There's a bunch of stuff out there. I can't advise you on what's right for your business because, frankly, it changes depending on what vertical in, what sort of product you're selling, what sort of media mix, what sort of segment you've got. You've got to go out there and, as I said at the start, do the audits and try and figure out kind of where the data gaps are and how you plug them. I mean, I'm still amazed how many advertisers I speak to that are just kind of running stuff through Google and kind of just using the cookie data still, and surprised about the skew it's getting in iOS, or surprised that it just wants to spend all your money in Android. Of course it does. That's the only place it can see any conversion events. So, I'm not convinced by what Google are doing. I'm also not convinced by their solution. I think kind of as advertisers, you've got to go out there and kind of take some accountability. And it isn't easy, right? It's absolutely hard to go and kind of build these things. So, you know, there is an element of trial and error in all of this, but you've got to go and find the bits that work for you.
Does anybody want to jump on that?
Yeah, I think kind of you wonder why brands aren't doing everything they can with every bit of data, and that complexity doesn't help. But that, because of that uncertainty and the fact that people like Google aren't necessarily going to help us out in terms of giving us the route forward, I think I agree with Nick that you've got to take it into your own hands and say, right, going back to that consumer understanding plan, what do I want to understand about my consumer that helps me with my strategy and to deliver the brand experience that we know that the consumers meets the consumer's needs, and then you've got your how are you going to get to that? It's likely to be attracting first-party data if you can, or working with partners. Obviously cookies, while we can use them for what we need them for, then great. But if we haven't got that certainty, then it's hard for us to plan for that.
Okay, so next couple of years to next 5 years, how are we going to get to where we need to be in terms of customer data? What's exciting you? What tools and tech are out there? A little bit of future gazing would be nice. Nick, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I mean, I think the future is leveraging the technologies that already exist, right? So your opening question was the right one. Have kind of enough advertisers taken on the data? No, they haven't, right? So I think the future bit is to get into the clean rooms and to get into the kind of alternative IDs and to start kind of learning how to properly leverage these and kind of put the cookie to bed. I think that is our kind of next 5 years kind of laid out as we go and figure that out.
Great.
I wish I knew what the next 5 years so no. For me, I say that it's not knowing just having the data, but knowing why people are behaving the way in which they are, you know, behind the data. So understanding the why will be really important, and that's where it gets interesting.
Experimentation and collaboration, I'd say. So taking a thin slice of what you're trying to do, being clear on what you are trying to do, and then finding the right people to collaborate on that. It's for a mid-sized business, it's impossible to have the huge number of kind of data experts or whatever you need to be able to do it all yourself. So collaborating with the right people.
I'm going to say it, but for me it is AI, but only from the perspective of we're fortunate enough to have a load of data. It's how we optimize that and to utilize AI in terms of that optimization, and then looking at transformer models that are specifically for retail and grocery that will heighten it even further. So I'm on the bandwagon.
Same. Sort of what you're prompting your AI to do is going to be transformative, right? And it will be the difference between a brand winning and losing, because you know it's clear most creatives, most go-to-market messaging, most strategies will have some AI element to it. I'd imagine creatives are almost fully entirely generated at that point, which brings the cost down of creatives and allows you to throw a lot more creatives at the wall. The balance between the cost and the go-to-market on advertising is going to shift fundamentally. And so what questions you ask, how you prompt sort of opportunities, how you prompt gaps in the market are going to be key, especially within your internal data rather than the external data. So I actually think the biggest transformation is going to be for customer data, for internal data, is going to be how we use AI to ask the questions like one asked, to not be run-of-the-mill, but to actually sort of take the path that no one else is taking.
Wow, what a panel, and loads more on digital shifts coming up tomorrow. But first, we have some really exciting stuff which Steve's going to tell you about. But first, thanks to my panel.